Attention! Attention! Ladies and gentlemen, attention! There is a herd of killer rabbits headed this way, and we desperately need your help. Good morning, everyone. This is Stone Gasman, live from New York City. And this morning, we are going to be doing an audio commentary for the 1972 MGM classic, Night of the Lepus. Yes, this is an actual movie from 1972 starring Stuart, Whitman, Janet Leigh, Rory, Calhoun, and DeForest, Kelley. And we'll be talking a lot about those four actors as we view this movie. Night of Lepus, I knew that when I was going to do all these horror commentaries for 1972, I was like, shit, I got to do Night of Lepus. You know, and I've seen it several times. I've seen this movie more than once. And I must confess that both times I didn't get enough bad movie enjoyment as I would typically get from bad movies that are considered "quote unquote" so bad it's good, as the audio commentary by author Leigh Gambin says that he hates that term, and especially when it comes to Lepus, because he's actually very much a fan of this movie. Now, I must confess that upon a most recent rewatch, particularly after listening to both the commentaries on the Blu-ray, I got to confess that my appreciation for Lepus has risen a little bit. It's risen a little bit, and but we still should have a lot of fun while watching it, because even if you don't take it seriously, and I think it's impossible to take it seriously, I think you'll have a lot of fun with this, especially if you've never seen it before. Before we start, I want to say hi to Dan Shine. Always great to see you, sir. Hope everything is going well at Flesh Wound Radio. And lovely to see you, that Muse. Lovely to see you as well. Yeah, like I said, I think we're going to have a lot of fun tonight. So anyway, I'll give you guys just a few more minutes before we get started here on Night of the Lepus. I wanted to let everybody know real quick that, yes, tonight at 9 p.m., I will be doing an audio commentary for The Possession of Joel Delaney, starring Shirley MacLaine. And yes, I have started the book, and I will have this book read by tonight in preparation for that. In fact, this was the reason why I didn't read the book that Lepus is supposedly based on. It's actually not based on that book at all. But I will be doing that at 9 p.m. tonight. And then at 11 p.m., I will be doing Brian De Palma's Sisters, which I will be watching on the Criterion channel and doing my commentary that way. And Cliff Booth, always great to have you, sir. I hope you're having a great evening, splendid Friday evening. And so that will be tonight. Tomorrow night, we will be doing Deathline and Tam Lin, two very interesting films from 1972. One of them directed by Roddy McDowall, of all people, and starring Ava Gardner. That's Tam Lin, and I'm really looking forward to watching that one because I'm actually a huge fan of it. And then finally on Halloween night, we shall be doing Don't Torture a Duckling, directed by Lucio Fulci. First time watch for me. In fact, I'll probably watch it for the first time on Sunday. And then at 11 p.m., we will be doing a 100th anniversary commentary to cap off the entire month of 50th anniversary horror film commentaries from 72. We will top it all off with a 100th anniversary commentary for Häxan, Witchcraft Through the Ages, written and produced and directed by Benjamin Christensen. And that happens to be my absolute favorite silent horror movie, even more so than Nosferatu. And believe me, I love Nosferatu. So why don't we go ahead and get started with Night of the Lepus here. I am paused at the MGM logo. Oh, also real quick, cable channel 11, glad you can join us tonight. And yes, please say hi to everybody. I mean, believe me, all you guys are awesome. I'm so happy you all came out tonight, and I think we're ready to have some genuine fun here. So on the count of 3, 2, 1, and play. And I think Leo the Lion is saying, oh, this movie is crap. Well, he probably said that in 72, to be perfectly honest here. So now, this opening, which has this newscaster basically explaining that there's a special report when it comes to the rabbit population and how it's exploded in Arizona and the West over the past few months. He here's a black and white newsreel from probably about the 50s, where we see the and he gives this kind of weird commentary about where there's a plague of rabbits that has become a threat to human beings and their existence, if you can believe that. Well, interestingly enough, this year I actually watched an Australian horror film, which the name escapes me at the moment. I should have double checked it. But the thing is that that movie specifically addresses this rabbit problem, where it ruins the crops, and thus it really ruins the farmers and their work that they're supposed to do to raise the crops and feed human beings. So, and this was a real thing in the 60s and the 70s. See, rabbit war, U.S. battles pests to save new trees. And all over the American West, there have been similar outbreaks, and the same battle lines have been drawn. Now, the thing is, after watching that after watching that Australian movie, they have a newsreel sequence that is pretty much exactly like this. And in the early 70s, this was actually in the 60s and 70s, this was considered a genuine threat. It really was. But the inspiration behind this movie is actually because of the surprise success of a 1971 film called Willard, which, if you remember, or if you've seen the remake with Crispin Glover, which I actually think is rather superior, it was about these rats. And so because that became a surprise hit, the studios were like, oh, we got to look for these like animal horror flicks, where these different animals attack human beings and become a genuine threat. And so they acquired the rights to this book, which we're going to see the credit for here in a minute. But they acquired the rights to this book called The Year of the Angry Rabbit, which is really like a Cold War era type of commentary, which specifically addresses the rabbit issues in Australia. But I'm telling you all right now, and as Lee Gambin and also the other commentator on the Blu-ray, who is pop culture historian Russell Dyball, they both basically explained that the filmmakers and the writers in particular basically toss the book aside. They toss the book aside and they just do this rather generic horror film. And yes, I say generic, even though there is fun to be had. But, the plot is, very, very familiar when it comes to this type of thing. See, screenplay by Don Holliday and Gene R. Kearney, based on the novel by The Year of the Angry Rabbit by Russell Bearden. But like I said, I didn't bother reading the book because, A, I wanted to read Possession of Joel Delaney. And second, because the movie has virtually nothing to do with the book, I decided to pass on it. And thank you so much, Dan. Yeah, the name was escaping me. Yeah, the Australian flick is called Cecilia, and that came out in 1989. And I actually did a stream of that with horror author Lauren Dixon and some other veterans of Region Free, where we talk about it on the Obscurity Report. And I still have mixed feelings about that movie. If you want to check it out, just go to Lauren Dixon's channel. Visited by Voices is the name of the channel, actually, and look for Obscurity Report Cecilia. But yeah, I still have mixed feelings over that movie, even though I thought it was a rare find. I mean, and I have a soft spot for. Oh, that's right, Dan. I'm so sorry. Yeah, I know. Yeah, I was wondering what. Yeah, I forget who else was there. You were there. Yeah, I mean, there were about 5 or 6 of us. I don't remember everybody that was there, but it was like 3 months ago. But anyway, so this is Rory Calhoun, who did a lot of westerns, and he suffered a lot of injuries during those westerns. In fact, Lee Gambin talks about practically every injury that he had gotten before Night of the Lepus, which is quite extensive. I mean, here again, I don't want to repeat everything that's being said on those commentaries, but at the same time, yeah, this is very much a cult actor named Rory Calhoun. To 80s audiences, he's actually more well known of being in like Hell Comes to Frogtown and Avenging Angel, those type of films. But very long career in westerns. And here we have two other stars of the movie. Here we have on the right Stuart Whitman, and on the left is, of course, DeForest Kelley. Now, when I first saw this movie, in the early 1990s, and I watched it on television. And I just think my father and I were trying to look for like different things to watch, and this was, of course, kind of late at night and everything. And we came across this movie, Night of the Lepus, which, as soon as my father saw DeForest Kelley, he decided, you know what, let's watch this, because he was a massive Star Trek fan. This DeForest Kelley, of course, played Dr. Bones McCoy on the original Star Trek series, and also on the animated series, and into the movies in the 80s and 90s and everything. But sadly, even though DeForest Kelley had a long career in westerns before this, just like Rory Calhoun, this was actually his last like big film before all the Star Trek films came about, starting in 1979 with the motion picture. But here we have also our fourth lead, Miss Janet Leigh. Yes, wife to Tony Curtis, mother to Jamie Lee Curtis. But this is not Janet Leigh's daughter, Jamie Lee, as a matter of fact. In fact, I just read on IMDb that she specifically did not want either of her daughters, Jamie Lee or her older sister. The name escapes me, even though I saw a picture on Twitter earlier today of her with her father, Tony Curtis, on the set of Some Like It Hot. And Jamie Lee actually confirmed on that tweet, no, that's not me, that's my sister. So, because she was born in 58, and Some Like It Hot was shot a little earlier than that. But, I got to admit that there is some marquee value with Night of the Lepus and this cast. I mean, look, I actually do think it's very interesting to see Janet Leigh and DeForest Kelley, in the same film. And, Janet Leigh had a little bit more, I think, prestige in Hollywood than DeForest Kelley, who, of course, was in a lot of, television shows, specifically westerns, as I mentioned before. But, it is fascinating to see all of these actors in this film that, admittedly has a very ridiculous premise. And as we, get to the miniatures and the other effects, we will definitely see at that point how ridiculous this gets in an amusing way, in amusing fashion. I mean, it's actually kind of mind-boggling to think that a major studio like MGM, you got to remember that MGM was like the king of the golden age of Hollywood. I mean, this is the studio that Clark Gable made movies at. This was the studio that put out like Best Picture winners like The Great Ziegfeld and The Life of Emile Zola and films like that. They really dominated Hollywood in the 1930s and 1940s. I mean, they put out The Wizard of Oz, and they also helped with the distribution of Gone with the Wind and sort of so. But you got to also remember that in the late 60s, a lot of the studio system, the traditional studio system, was dying. It was actually kind of on life support. And so what ended up happening is a lot of the big studio execs, and in MGM's case, you of course have Louis B. Mayer, and the Goldwyn actually refers to Samuel Goldwyn. But they were selling all the studios to corporations. And the corporations were basically taking over the studio system. And a lot of them had no idea how to, of course, make movies and sell movies, despite the fact that even though a lot of the producers of those old studio systems are not looked at in high regard today, and of course they treated their actors and actresses like cattle when it came to these very strict contracts. I mean, you got MGM at the time in the 30s was essentially a factory. It was essentially a genuine factory where they, churned out these films in a quick amount of time just to get as much profit as possible. And they would work the cast and crew like cattle, essentially in getting all of these movies made. Yeah, I remember reading, I mean, I've read a lot of books about that era, like when Clark Gable made a movie like Men in White in 1934, which was highly controversial as being a pre-code movie about abortion. Yes, I'm on a tangent. I will come back to Lepus, I assure you. But the thing is that, the MGM system at that time was 1,000% different than what it was in the early 1970s when they ultimately chose Lepus. Because why did they chose Lepus? Because this rat movie called Willard did exceptionally well the year before. So, everybody now wanted to get their hands on these animal attack pictures. And specifically, the type of genre that we're talking about is ecological horror. And earlier in the year, I actually did a commentary for this this cool little AIP film called Frogs, which, if you haven't seen that, it stars Sam Elliott long before he became a star. And basically, he comes down to the southern plantation in Florida, where Academy Award winner Ray Milland has been killing all the local wildlife through pesticides and poisons and everything. So all the frogs in the movie, and to be honest, there are no frogs in the movie at all. They were just all toads. They basically psychologically tell all the other animals to kill the human beings on this plantation for killing all the wildlife. And it was the type of thing of nature getting revenge against the human population for what they were doing to the animals and everything. And and here Stuart Whitman is explaining everything that's the issues about the rabbits and what's going to lead to this kind of a explosion in the population, but also in terms of size, because eventually these rabbits are going to be growing to I don't know what, 50, 60 pounds or something like that. I mean, believe me, this movie is one of those that needs to be seen to be believed. The idea that, these giant rabbits could attack this small town. It sounds like the most ludicrous idea in the world. And yet the ultimate inspiration, which, like I said, goes back to Australia and the rabbits destroying the crops due to overpopulation and everything, was a legitimate threat. And that's why watching Night of the Lepus now, it's less ridiculous than the first time my dad and I watched it all those years ago. Of course, it's still ridiculous that rabbits could grow to these monstrous proportions and just invade this community. But at the same time, the premise is ridiculous enough that you can have fun with this. Absolutely. Yes, vintage Sam Elliott. Frogs was great. And just real quick, I said this on the Frogs commentary. You could check that out. But there's two scenes where Sam Elliott takes his shirt off. And ultimately, that's what what made him be cast in Lifeguard 4 years later, which was ultimately the inspiration for Baywatch. So in a weird roundabout way, Sam Elliott with his shirt off in Frogs is the reason why Baywatch ultimately came to existence. That's my favorite trivia thing when it comes to Frogs. It's a fun drive-in flick. Yeah, I don't hate Frogs. In fact, I was actually quite lenient with it in my commentary, in that if you take these nature revenge movies a little bit seriously, because look, let's be clear here. Humans have done a lot of damage to the planet. Now, of course, as George Carlin would say, oh, the planet is fine. It's the people that are screwed. Okay. And especially when you consider global warming, caused by corporations and everything, thinking about, profits over people and ultimately over the planet. I mean, it makes sense. You know, in a sense, I kind of root for the animals to get their revenge against human society. I never looked at frogs the same. Yes. Yes. Yeah, after you watch the movie Frogs, you will definitely never look at a frog the same way again. I don't know if I can say the same thing about Lepus here, but anyway, we'll talk about these child actors here in just a minute. But love Frogs, perfect balance of cheese and horror. Yeah, I mean, even as a kid, I actually dug Frogs. You know, I remember I saw it on television while waiting for our car to be get a wash and an oil change and everything. And I just sat there for an hour and a half watching Frogs one day in this auto detailing shop, and it was just a fascinating trip back through time and looking at these eco horror films. And of course, you also have Day of the Animals with Christopher George, Grizzly, also with Christopher George, which was appropriately dubbed as Jaws with Claws. Yes. And shirtless Sam Elliott, even better. Oh, yes, definitely. I mean, when he took his shirt off in Frogs, it raised a lot of eyebrows. A lot of eyebrows, definitely. So why don't we go a little bit more detail with these actors? And we'll start with Rory Calhoun here, who was born in 1922 and passed in 1999. And he actually did more than just Westerns, even though that's what he was primarily remembered for. But he was also in How to Marry a Millionaire with Marilyn Monroe, of course. Let's see. Okay. In 1950 to 1954, he worked for 20th Century Fox, where he became a star with such films as A Ticket to Tomahawk, Meet Me After the Show with Betty Grable, and I'd Climb the Highest Mountain. He was promoted to co-star with the 1952 film With a Song in My Heart, and Way of a Gaucho with Gene Tierney, directed by Jacques Tourneur. Calhoun was promoted to star in westerns The Silver Whip and Powder River with Corinne Calvet. And he was the love interest of Betty Grable in How to Marry a Millionaire. And he was also a second male lead in River of No Return as Marilyn Monroe's boyfriend, but he loses her to Robert Mitchum. God damn it. That Robert Mitchum, man, he just had to get in the way. He had to get in the way. He went back to Universal, where he made another Western called Four Guns to the Border. And he was also in another musical called Ain't Misbehaving. He was also in Red Sundown and Raw Edge in the 1950s. He wrote the story for the film Shotgun in 1955, made by Allied Artists, and tried to star in it, but Universal would not loan him. In 1957, Calhoun formed Rorvik Productions, a production company with his partner Victor Orsatti. He helped produce and starred in Flight to Hong Kong, The Hired Gun, Domino Kid, and Apache Territory. In the 1960s, he was on TV shows such as Gunsmoke, Death Valley Days, and Bonanza. Very huge shows for the 60s. He went to Spain for The Colossus of Rhodes, directed by Sergio Leone. He was robbed during the filming of that, and he also did The Treasure of Monte Cristo in 1961 in Britain, and then in Italy, he did Marco Polo. He returned to the U.S. to make several films for producer A.C. Lyles, who also happens to be the producer of Night of the Lepus. And he was considered the lead for James West in the CBS television series The Wild Wild West. And I know, when people think of Wild Wild West now, they think of Will Smith and the mechanical spiders and everything. But it was actually a pretty interesting show in the 60s, which was basically like James Bond out west. But the producers were not impressed with his screen test and instead chose Robert Conrad. He returned to Europe to make Our Men in Baghdad and The Emerald of Artamana. And he continued to appear in both television and film throughout the 70s and 80s, including Thunder in Carolina, Rawhide, Gilligan's Island, Hawaii Five-0, and Starsky and Hutch. He became known to a new generation for cult films like Motel Hell, the Angel movies, and Hell Comes to Frogtown. His final role was that of the grizzled family patriarch and rancher Ernest Tucker in the film Pure Country. Yeah, we all remember that classic, right, with George Strait and Leslie Ann Warren. It's actually not terrible, but come on, it's only for country fans. Let's be honest here. He passed away in 1999 at the age of 76. He does have a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, and as far as his filmography is concerned, I think there was a couple other films I wanted to mention here. Revenge of Bigfoot in 1979. Juan Tantan, the Dog Who Saved Hollywood in 1976. And finally, Finger on the Trigger in 1965. So very long resume, and still, recognized for films like these and Angel, and of course the westerns that he did at the time. Rory Calhoun was on the best episode of Gilligan's Island, The Hunter, where he hunts Gilligan with a rifle for 24 hours. Are you serious? I have never seen an episode of Gilligan's Island. I mean, when I tried to watch it like back in the day, like on Nick at Night, I just found it too stupid. I mean, yeah, the title song is kind of catchy, but I just couldn't watch it. I didn't like Bob Denver. I didn't. But that is very, very interesting. Thank you so much for that, John. Yeah. I kind of wish he had succeeded in that, actually. Okay, so let's go to Stuart Whitman now, who is, he's top billed in this thing, even though, to be perfectly honest, I know the other three actors more from other things. But Stuart Whitman was born in 1928, passed in 2020. Yeah, he just passed 2 years ago at the age of 92. Yeah, lived a long life. He lived to 92 years old. In 1948, Whitman was discharged from the Corps of Engineers in the United States Army and started to study acting and appear in plays. In the 1950s, he had a streak working in mostly bit parts in films like When Worlds Collide, The Day the Earth Stood Still, Barbed Wire, and The Man from the Alamo. On television, Whitman guest starred in series such as Dr. Christian, The Roy Rogers Show, and Death Valley Days, and also had a recurring role on Highway Patrol. His first lead role in a film was Johnny Trouble in 1957. Now, I'm going to pause briefly here because this first rabbit kill is really something to see. Here we go. These big bunnies are going to start flopping around the countryside. And, it is glorious. It is glorious in its own way. And look, you got to give the people that worked on this movie a little bit of credit for, the miniatures are actually fascinating. They're not really terrible, but they are fascinating in how they just pluck these bunnies down into these overlarge, these tiny sets and just have them wreak havoc. And these close-ups with the blood and the drool and the teeth and everything, they're supposed to generate menace, but to be honest, they just come off as rather silly. I mean, that's the thing. I'm trying to figure out how it's really possible to make giant big bunnies menacing, and I just can't. I can't. And that's why I think my father and I had such a joke with this movie back in the day, because really, somebody actually decided to say, yeah, I know, let's make a movie about killer rabbits. And it'll be like, other films like The Blob and that kind of thing, where this, this small town has to deal with this growing danger. But I mean, giant rabbits? Really? I mean, frogs, I think that frogs, there's a little bit more of a, shall we say, in that movie, you kind of look past the whole ridiculousness of it and consider the implications of what we're doing to the environment. But with this movie, it takes it takes the kernel. Oh God! Now for a PG rated movie, I got to say that there is more gore than I think that you would normally see in these type of films. I mean, they really wanted to make these deaths quite graphic in a sense. These corpses where these rabbits did a bunch of damage on them, but of course, we don't see that. I mean, it's like watching Grizzly, which actually is a not bad little B movie. I mean, it's a Jaws ripoff, but like you see a shot of like a bear just growling and like dropping into the camera, and you might see like a hairy arm with some claws on it just ripped like clothes off, and there's some blood and everything. But you never see any like real genuine money shots because, oh yeah, come on, you're gonna put actors in front of a bear and everything. I don't know, but with rabbits, I guess I'm thinking, what more can they do than just have giant close-ups of the rabbit, put some blood, put some drool, and like have the teeth be all into the lens and everything. There's not much you can do. But I mean, I guess in 1972 they did as much as they could considering the ridiculous premise. In the late 1950s, for Stuart Whitman, 20th Century Fox was on a drive to develop new talent. Hence, Whitman was signed to the Star Building program. He was the lead in Darby's Rangers, 1958, China Doll, 10 North Frederick, The Decks Ran Red, Hound Dog Man, The Story of Ruth Murder Incorporated, The Comancheros, and The Mark, the latter of which he was nominated for an Academy Award for Best Actor. Some of Whitman's subsequent roles include The Longest Day, The Day and the Hour, Those Magnificent Men in Their Flying Machines, Cimarron Strip, and he also acted regularly on television, with some of his credits including The Streets of San Francisco, Love, American Style, Quincy, The Hardy Boys, Nancy Drew Mysteries, which I've actually watched some of those, The Pirate, Condominium, Knight Rider, Matt Houston, A-Team, SWAT, Fantasy Island, Murder, She Wrote, Once Upon a Texas Train, Knots Landing, The Adventures of Briscoe County Jr., and finally Walker, Texas Ranger. From 1988 to 1992, he acted as Jonathan Kent on the television series Superboy, and he was seen in projects until 2000, after which he was reported to be retired. And so he was retired for 20 years before his death in 2020. In 1967, Whitman admitted, quote, "I'm the type who must work constantly. In the early 70s, he worked increasingly in Europe. Quote, I left Hollywood because it was getting to be a mad mess. There are only about 2 really good scripts going around, and they always go to the industry's 2 top stars. I thought that in Europe, something better might come my way, and it did. I've made mistakes in the past, but I kept bouncing back. I always thought that an actor is destined to act, but now I realize that if you do one role well, you get stuck with it," unquote. On September 25th, 1970, Whitman was seen in the Bracken's World episode Murder Off Camera. Also that year, he appeared in the films The Last Escape and The Invisible Six. In 1971, he acted in Captain Apache and The City Beneath the Sea and the television film Revenge. And then on January 12th, 1972, he was in an episode of Rod Serling's Night Gallery, specifically Lindeman's Catch, written by Rod Serling and directed by Jeff Corey. And the story is about a cold-hearted sea captain, played by Stuart Whitman, who captures a mermaid. For all those who want to check that out. In July, Whitman acted in William F. Claxton's newly released horror film, Night of the Lepus. Yes, this came out on July 26, 1972. In it, Whitman and Janet Leigh play a couple of zoologists who are looking for ways to reduce the rabbit population that has infested a nearby ranch. They test a serum on some rabbit specimens that would cause them birth defects and hence reduce the population. One of them escapes, and soon after, the area is infested and under attack by giant rabbits. The production was troubled, and the film was naturally critically lambasted upon its release. Whitman said that he ended up with the role because at the time he was working with Lee Remick on a film called The Candyman, which was canceled. When he requested his salary and was turned down, he was told he would be compensated only if he took the lead in Night of the Lepus, the screenplay of which he found to be ridiculous right from the start. I mean, just look at his face right here. It's like, I'm in a movie about killer rabbits. Really, that's his reaction for pretty much the whole film. It's like, what the hell am I doing this? Why? He went on to say that the film damaged his reputation and made him unbankable. Despite its poor reputation, the film, of course, has developed a cult status, but was retrospectively described by critics as ridiculous and unintentionally funny. And the same year, in 1972, he did a Disney film called Run, Cougar, Run, directed by Jerome Cortland. That's weird. Jerome Cortland actually produced one of my top 3 Disney films, which is actually Pete's Dragon. On December 2nd, Whitman appeared in the Carnival the Vaudevillians episode of Fantasy Island. And that same month, on the 10th, Whitman made a second appearance on Night Gallery in an episode titled Fright Night. Another TV show in which he appeared was Ghost Story. He also appeared in The Woman Hunter that year. In 1973, he guest starred in an episode of The Streets of San Francisco, which had Michael Douglas, and a made-for-television movie called The Man Who Died Twice, with Whitman in the lead role. He also did another horror movie in 1974 called Welcome to Arrow Beach. But yeah, very, very long career. Very, very long career. A lot of different things, not just Westerns. He also was in a Hemingway biography miniseries called Hemingway, where he played the subject's father. And see, yeah. And aside from being nominated for an Academy Award for The Mark in 1961, he also won a Western Heritage Award for the 1961 show The Comancheros, and he's also included on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. And finally, among his other films, we have Deadly Intruder, Once Upon a Texas Train, Moving Target, Omega Cop, Heaven and Earth, and Trial by Jury. And his last film was a TV movie called The President's Man in 2000. Although he did appear in a documentary right before he passed called Jay Sebring, Cutting to the Truth. Yeah. Now, just to give everybody an update on the timestamp real quick, we are 33 minutes in. We're a third of the way through Night of the Lepus. Let's see. The producer of the film is A.C. Lyles, as I mentioned before, and this was his only science fiction production, his only horror and science fiction film. And part of the reason for that is that he made his name, producing a lot of Westerns. But in the early 70s, the Westerns were dying. And as a matter of fact, in the commentaries on the Blu-ray, they both explain that at this time that any television show with a tree or a bush was basically taking off the airways at that point. I mean, Westerns was like a dominant genre in the 40s and the 50s and into the 60s, and especially with all the Western shows like Gunsmoke and everything. It was a very dominant genre, but at this time it was pretty much dying. I mean, pretty much dead by the end of the 1970s. So A.C. Lyles had to find another outlet in terms of producing, and so he settled on Night of the Lepus. To craft the film, he pulled together people he had worked with on other Westerns. Gene R. Kearney and Don Holliday were tasked with converting the novel to a screenplay. In doing so, they removed nearly all aspects of the novel, which was a black comedy, the plot of which focused on Australia dominating the world with a super weapon, inadvertently created through the rabbits, and moved its setting from Australia to Arizona. Principal photography took place at the old Tucson Studios in Tucson, Arizona, a site well known for its use in Western pictures. Filming commenced at the end of January of 1972 and concluded in early March. According to Turner Classic Movies' David Collott, director William F. Claxton, who we'll talk a little bit more about later, he also came from a Western film background. In directing this film, he applied the same techniques used in his other films and declined the use of, quote, standard horror effects that would have enhanced the atmosphere, such as canted camera angles, dark shadows, and eerie music. I mean, this is essentially less of a horror film and more of a Western with a science fiction aspect to it. And, well, of course, I find it hard to call it a horror film, despite the amount of blood, because, you know, it's almost impossible to find any of this scary. But Janet Leigh, who played Jerry Bennett, accepted the role because filming was close to her home. Very convenient, allowing her to travel on weekends and allowing her family to visit her on set. Though she felt the script, quote, read well, she declined to allow her two children play minor roles, as she did not want them to see or be part of any type of horror film. Now, as we all know, the great irony of that is that Jamie Lee Curtis became a star only 6 years after this with Halloween, and became arguably an even bigger screen queen than her mother, who, of course, appeared in Psycho. Janet Leigh would later state the film, quote, lacked an ideal director and to bring the script to life, and the film failed in part because it was impossible to make a bunny rabbit menacing. And I'm completely understandable. I completely agree with that sentiment. She later reflected, quote, no one put a gun to my head and said I had to do it. What no one realized was that no matter what you do, a bunny rabbit is a bunny rabbit. A rat that can be menacing, so can a frog, hence Willard and frogs. Spiders or scorpions or alligators, they could all work in that situation, and they have. But a bunny rabbit? How can you make a bunny rabbit menacing? Unquote. Fellow rifleman actor Paul Fix was given the role of the sheriff, town under siege, while DeForest Kelley, who frequently guest starred in Westerns, was cast as Elgin Clark, the college president who asked researchers to try to stop the rabbits. The domesticated rabbits differed greatly in appearance from the wild rabbits that were plaguing the Southwest at the time. In the film, this was explained by stating that they were descended from recent rabbit farm escapees. To depict the rabbit attacks, a combination of techniques were used. For some scenes, the rabbits were filmed in close-up, stomping on miniature structures in slow motion. And for attack scenes, they had ketchup smeared all over their faces. And I find that particularly funny because in Psycho, of course, they tested ketchup as for the blood in the shower sequence to make it, so they would avoid, showing actual red gore on film. So they had to find, something to, use for blood. They tried movie blood, they tried ketchup, and then they tried chocolate syrup. And the chocolate syrup actually registered the best on the black and white photography. And of course, Janet Leigh says all that in the documentary, The Making of Psycho, which is on all the physical media releases. I've seen that documentary maybe 3 or 4 times, and I love it. Look at Janet Leigh's reaction there. It's like, oh my God, it's a rabbit clawing him to death. Oh my God. These rabbits need to find their own carrots. Seriously. Oh God, look at all that. Look at all that. Yeah, that is all catsup. Yeah, that's all just, regular, I don't know, Heinz or whatever, but yeah, that's definitely ketchup right there. They might as well use what they used in Dawn of the Dead, which was actually quote unquote blood from the 3M company. I love what Tom Savini described it as. He called it looking like melted crayons. So I don't know what looks more ridiculous, the ketchup or the melted crayon type of blood. Now, see, oh, look, I had a bunny when I was young. Okay, I admit I had a bunny. Her name was Holly and everything. And I like rabbits. I've always liked rabbits, and that's what I'm saying. They're too cute and fluffy to be menacing. I mean, as Janet Leigh noted, when we think of rabbits on screen, we think of Bugs Bunny. We think of rabbits just being used as pets in other films. I mean, this and Cecilia, these might be the only two films that actually treat rabbits as more than a nuisance and where they're actually a major part of the plot. Originally titled Rabbits, exactly, Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer changed the title and avoided including any rabbits in most promotional materials to try to keep the feathered mutant creatures a secret. On the posters and everything, you just see the eyes and everything. So now, just imagine that for a moment. You're going to see a movie called Night of the Lepus. Now, I don't know how much of the American population knew exactly what Lepus was the scientific name for, but just pretend that you're going to a movie theater in 1972. You want to see a horror movie. You go in not knowing exactly what it's about, but it's a horror movie. And you find out it's about giant big bunnies terrorizing the Arizona countryside. I mean, I would imagine a lot of people would have a WTF reaction to that. Absolutely. Jamie, always lovely to see you. Hope you're having a wonderful evening. We are watching, of course, the legendary film Night of the Lepus. And we are just upon the 42-minute mark. We are at the 42-minute mark of Night of the Lepus. Yeah. The famous Big Bunny attack movie. Of all the reviews that came out on Night of the Lepus, my favorite is still Leonard Maltin's in his book, where he basically just says what the movie is about without any criticism. And then he says they called the National Guard, but not Elmer Fudd, to take care of the growing rabbit menace. Yeah, they should have contacted Elmer Fudd. Let's see. In a July 1972 issue of the New York Times, Vincent Canby wrote it's not an especially memorable movie. It was typical for the genre of science fiction horror, and that it failed because the rabbits, despite attempts to make them appear huge and scary, still look like Easter bunnies. In an October 1972 issue, fellow critic Roger Greenspun panned it for not, quote, even reasonably trying to make the rabbits scary. Its reliance on, quote, tired cliches of monsterdom. Technical laziness in its special effects, stupid story, and dumb direction that leaves the film in a limbo between a horror film and a fairy tale. In the monthly film bulletin, Tom Milne felt Night of the Lepus had a promising beginning before moving into a well-worn horror groove, such as the effort to trap Jerry and Amanda alone in a deserted area for a last-minute rescue. Noting that the film had a, quote, certain overall charm and several striking sequences, he felt the film would have been more successful if he had the courage of its convictions and its realism. As an example, he points to the scene following the attack on the Calhoun ranch, in which Cole is walking into town and tourists refuse to stop and pick him up because he has a gun. The tourists then go to the small town where the rabbits have killed Mildred and are hiding in the general store building. That's coming up here. That's coming up. Rather than becoming the next victims, the family call it a ghost town and leave. In the 1977 piece Dark Dreams 2.0, a psychological history of the modern horror film, Charles Derry compared it to the earlier successful works The Birds and Willard, particularly the former, noting that both featured, quote, a lovable creature. Though he felt the special effects were poor, he felt Night of Lepus successfully tied into ongoing fears of throwing ecology out of balance, with the rabbits serving as an appropriate metaphor for human fears about overpopulation. I can see that. I can definitely see that. Absolutely. All Movies Jeremy Wheeler felt that the film was, quote, all good, unintentionally campy fun. And yes, people have come around on this movie a bit. Obviously, I don't know if it's because people just find the whole premise fascinating of giant bunnies terrorizing the countryside. Just look at this. I mean, look at the model water tower there in the back. I mean, like, oh, isn't this so cute? I mean, that's the thing. You find the rabbits cute, but you also find the sets cute. So it's like, I mean, would this scare even a 5-year-old? Would this even scare a 5-year-old? Okay, a legitimate question. Would anybody be scared by this? I really don't think so. Unless for some reason that you have, unless you have some kind of irrational fear of bunnies. Wait a minute. What year? What is that? The fear of rabbits is known as leporophobia. 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 The fear of rabbits, it is a very uncommon phobia. Some people with this phobia gained it after a traumatic rabbit attack. Really? What? Okay, usually in their youth. Okay, that makes sense. That makes sense. However, rabbits rarely attack humans and are not capable of causing much damage. So this type occurrence is very, very rare. Those who suffer from this phobia may find the appearance of rabbits unsettling and or fear that rabbits will attack them. Like most phobias, the fear can be overcome by therapy and through gradual exposure to the source of fear. When I keep thinking of any type of phobia or anything, I keep thinking of arachnophobia because I love that running gag Jeff Daniels does where he just keeps saying therapy. And he's trying to kill these tarantulas or these spiders from South America. Excuse me. With tarantulas, I'm actually thinking of Kingdom of the Spiders, which had, of course, DeForest Kelley's fellow Star Trek actor William Shatner. And I can't wait to do Kingdom of the Spiders, maybe in about 5 years' time, because that's actually one of the best animal attack films of the 1970s. Trust me, you'll be boldly going where no spider has gone before. I assure you of that. Noting that the special effects were, quote, obvious, Jeremy Wheeler criticized the truly heinous dialogue and remarked that Janet Leigh slums it by appearing in the film. In Stories Rabbits Tell, A Natural and Cultural History of a Misunderstood Creature, Susan E. Davis and Margot DeMello considered the film a, quote, entertaining romp. And praising the alarmingly realistic circumstances behind the rabbit mutations while criticizing the notoriously badly done special effects. I mean, look at this. On one level, this is awesome. Okay, come on. What other film are you going to see rabbits like this, just, flopping around on all these people? I mean, look at this. Don't kill the bunnies. Oh, come on. See, that's the thing. The slow motion, unfortunately, I think is a detriment. I mean, I would have preferred this all be at regular speed, but, David Lynch loves Night of Lepus. Really? Really? Can somebody please explain that? I mean, I would really love somebody to explain that. I mean, really, if you're a David Lynch fan, I need an explanation. I really do need an explanation to that. But I wouldn't be surprised if there's other big directors who have a soft spot for this film too. I mean, maybe not Martin Scorsese, but maybe somebody like Edgar Wright, possibly. I mean, you could throw any other name out there who's worked in the science fiction and horror genres. Considered one of the worst career moves for Kelley and Leigh. They criticized the ending in which all the rabbits were killed, calling them unwitting victims of human attempts to control nature. In his book Video Hound's Horror Show, 999 Hair-Raising, Hellish, and Humorous Movies, critic Mike Mayo panned the film, calling the script lame. The scenes of the rabbits hopping around HO scale set. HO rail transport modeling scales. The sets in slow motion humorous, and the rabbits are just not scary. He also criticized the principal performers, stating that the film featured a group of so-so character actors. I wouldn't be that harsh, except Leigh, who he considered a star, and that all gave wooden performances. John J. Puccio of DVDtown.com felt Lepus would have been better had it been an intentionally humorous horror spoof, rather than a legitimate attempt at making a horror film, stating it was one. He found the actors stiff and uninvolved in delivering their lines, and that it seemed more like old television horse opera than a horror film, with more slow-paced filler than action sequences, and the few bits of action ruined by the corniest possible action music. AMC film critics Christopher Knoll states it is famously one of the worst films ever made. Here again, I can't quite go that far. He heavily criticizes Claxton, feeling that he just seems wholly incapable of making the movie remotely frightening or even making much sense, and that the bad special effects, quote, make the entire film a huge joke. Reviewing the title for ClassicHorror.com, Julia Merriam gave Night of Lepus credit for attempting to be a socially conscious eco-horror, and like I said, that I would say that more so for Frogs than Lepus, but criticized the slow pacing, bad dialogue, poor editing with a heavy reliance on stock footage that did not appear to be from the same film, and senseless character actions such as entering a rabbit-filled cave just to photograph them. She also criticized the film's obvious use of people in rabbit suits, but concluded its biggest flaw was that, here again, fluffy bunnies just aren't scary. Oh, whoops. In horror films of the 1970s, John Kenneth Muir felt it is one of the most ridiculous horror films ever conceived, with a poor blend of horror and environmentalism that resulted in being more of a comedy. He criticized the primitive special effects, badly done editing, and laughable dialogue, and noted that while the rabbits and actors are rarely seen on screen together, the filmmakers used obviously fake rabbit paws, obviously, and people in rabbit suits for the few scenes calling for human-rabbit interactions. Like most critics, he pointed out that the rabbits were cute bunnies rather than fanged, disease-ridden, mutated creatures, but felt the actors did the best they could with the material and praised them for keeping straight faces as they heroically stand against the onslaught of the bunnies. I wish I had one for you, Stone. Lynch is not clear on his interest in it, but I know it was part of his inspiration for rabbits. I think he talked about it in the Art Life documentary. Oh, wow. Okay. Mm-hmm. All right. Let's then talk about the director now. Well, the director is, of course, has the name of William F. Claxton. He was born in 1914 and passed away in 1996 at the age of 81. Now, see, I hate to think that they, can you imagine them like throwing a rabbit through the window when they attack these people? Oh my God. But Claxton got his start in Hollywood as a film editor in the 1940s, where he was employed as an editor for Edward Small Productions. During World War II, he served in the U.S. Signal Corps as a captain. He worked under Frank Capra, of all people, as a film editor on the Why We Fight series. And I've seen the Why We Fight series. It's actually a pretty interesting series of propaganda films that were made specifically to push America into war with, of course, Germany at the time. Claxton worked alongside Theodore Seuss Geisel in the animation and film department of the United States Army. His very first directorial effort was 1951's All That I Can Have. He is best known for his television work, however. Enjoyed a long stint as a producer-director of the syndicated Christian anthology series This Is the Life from 1951 to 1960. He spent much of the 50s with 20th Century Fox's Regal Pictures subsidiary, turning out medium-budget films which included God Is My Partner and Desire in the Dust. Occasionally, as the cast of Rockabilly Baby, he produced as well as directed. He was a close friend of actor Michael Landon, with whom he had worked on the NBC TV series Bonanza, Little House on the Prairie, and then Highway to Heaven, who also enjoyed the This Is Life series, which Claxton was involved with. Claxton also directed the feature-length series pilot Bonanza, The Next Generation. But he didn't do a lot of films. He didn't. Stagecoach to Fury, The Quiet Gun, Law of the Lawless, Stage to Thunder Rock. He also did the series High Chaparral. He did 68 episodes of Little House on the Prairie, 10 episodes of Fame, based on the movie musical. And Bonanza The Next Generation was his last thing. Although he did participate in the documentary Michael Landon, Memories with Laughter and Love, after the actor had passed away at a very, very young age. Yeah, Michael Landon was very, very young when he passed very sadly. Let's see here. The cinematographer of Night of the Lepus was a man by the name of Ted Voigtlander. Born in 1913, passed in 1988. He won 4 Primetime Emmy Awards and was nominated for 13 more for outstanding cinematography for his work on the TV programs Ben Casey, Wild Wild West, Bonanza, Little House on the Prairie, Highway to Heaven, and also the TV films It's Good to Be Alive, The Loneliest Runner, The Diary of Anne Frank, and The Bad Seed. Yeah, and those are the television versions, not the versions that came out in the 1950s. He died in December 1988 of cancer at the age of 65. Okay. Now, the score to this film was done by a man by the name of Jimmy Haskell, American composer and arranger of motion pictures and a wide variety of popular artists, including Elvis Presley, Neil Diamond, Crosby, Stills and Nash, Steely Dan, Billy Joel, and the Everly Brothers. He entered the motion picture soundtrack industry as an uncredited orchestrator for Dmitri Tiomkin's The Alamo, starring John Wayne. The following year, he composed his first score, Love in a Goldfish Bowl. His composition, The Silly Song, became the theme song of American television's The Hollywood Squares. Oh. He composed a variety of film scores, such as the Westerns for producer A.C. Lyles, and arranging Weird Al Yankovic's title song for Spy Hard. Oh, that was pretty much the only memorable thing about that movie. For those that don't remember, Spy Hard was a James Bond spoof with Leslie Nielsen. And Weird Al Yankovic actually wrote and actually appeared in the title sequence, which of course was a parody of all the Bond title sequences, where he sings this song Spy Hard. But instead of like the nude silhouettes, you had like BBW women swimming around instead. It's great, but unfortunately it's only the best part of that movie. Austin Powers, the Austin Powers trilogy, I think did a much better job of spoofing the Bond films, particularly when I feel that they were at their lowest point with Pierce Brosnan. Haskell was awarded an Emmy for outstanding achievement in music composition for a special for 1978 See How She Runs, and has received 2 other nominations. He was awarded Grammys for his arrangements of Ode to Billy Joe, recorded for Bobby Gentry, Bridge Over Troubled Water, recorded by Simon and Garfunkel, and If You Leave Me Now, take away the greatest part of me. Ooh, okay. Chicago. And other films that he did, he actually did The Honkers, which I did an audio commentary for earlier in the year. Dirty Mary, Crazy Larry. Death Game, 1977, which was remade as Jamie and I know all too well, Knock Knock with Keanu Reeves. So yeah, he actually did the music for the original Death Game. A Christmas to Remember, The Jericho Mile, Goldie and the Boxer, the Jane Mansfield Story, and Jake Spanner, Private Eye. Now, see, yeah, here are all the rabbits just hanging out in the general store. I mean, you could have shown like a few of them eating like, carrots and stuff like that. I mean, they could have made it a little bit more, clever, add like, just add little things here and there. Like, oh man, oh, he's covered in ketchup. The rabbits got him. Look at him. Stuart Whitman's like, okay, I guess I'll just go off camera here. Oh, so finally they bring in a helicopter. Yep, they're all hiding in the general store. All right, let's see here. Now, yeah, they used domestic rabbits filmed against miniature models and actors dressed in rabbit costumes. Yep. All right, now it's time to talk about, next to Janet Leigh, of course. Let's talk about the wonderful, wonderful DeForest Kelley. Now, known to his colleagues as simply D. Best known, of course, as Dr. Leonard Bones McCoy on Star Trek. But unfortunately, we do not see him come upon a body with ketchup all over it and say, "He's dead, Stuart." Yeah, that was terrible. Never mind. He appeared in episodes of The Donna Reed Show, Perry Mason, Tales of Wells Fargo, Wanted Dead or Alive with Steve McQueen, one of the best shows of that era. Boots and Saddles, Death Valley Days, Riverboat, The Fugitive, The Lawman, Bat Masterson, Gunsmoke, Have Gun Will Travel, The Millionaire, and Laredo. He appeared in the 1962 episode of Route 66, one of the most underrated shows of all time. Oh, Route 66 is so good. But he was in 1800 Days to Justice and The Clever Throne as Willis. He had a small role in the movie The View from Pompey's Head. For 9 years, Kelley played primarily villains. He built up an extensive list of credits alternating between television and pictures. He was afraid of typecasting, so he broke away from villains by starring in Where Love Is Gone and a television pilot called 333 Montgomery. The pilot was written by an ex-policeman named Gene Roddenberry. And a few years later, Kelley appeared in another Roddenberry pilot, Police Story, that was again not developed into a series. And then in 1966, of course, he got cast as Doc Bones McCoy in Star Trek. And is he my favorite Star Trek actor or character? Maybe. He might be. I mean, I have a special place in my heart for DeForest Kelley. He was the first of the original Star Trek actors who passed away in 1999. And what's funny is that, of course, a year after he did Night of Lepus, he did Star Trek the Animated Series. And there is actually an episode where he comes face to face with an animated rabbit. And that was obviously a little nod to Night of the Lepus. In 1987, he had a cameo in Encounter at Farpoint for Star Trek The Next Generation. And he appeared as Admiral Leonard McCoy, so he became an admiral at that point. Starfleet Surgeon General Emeritus. Several aspects of Kelley's background became part of McCoy's characterization, including his pronunciation of nuclear as nuclear. Kelley became a good friend of Star Trek castmates William Shatner and Leonard Nimoy from their first meeting in 1964. Shy by his own admission, he was the only cast member of the original Star Trek series never to have written or published an autobiography. The authorized biography From Sawdust to Stardust in 2005 was written posthumously by Terry Lee Roux of Lamar University in Beaumont, Texas. Kelley is regarded as the empath as his favorite Star Trek television episode. After Night of the Lepus, he made occasional appearances on television and in film, but essentially went into de facto retirement other than playing McCoy in the Star Trek film series. By 1978, he was earning up to $50,000 annually from appearances in Star Trek conventions. Like other Star Trek actors, Kelley received little of the enormous profits that the franchise generated for Paramount until Nimoy, as executive producer, helped arrange for Kelley to be paid $1 million for his very last film, which of course was Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country. And that's actually one of the best of the original series of films because basically he and Shatner are tried and convicted for murder of a Klingon ambassador. And so they're thrown onto this frozen planet in a prison where they're probably going to die there. And of course, by this time, DeForest Kelley, he was already in his 70s and everything. But he is especially memorable in that movie. One of my favorite lines near the end is when the Klingon president is talking at a peace summit. And, he starts saying, some ridiculous things to the point where Bones actually says to Spock, as they're preparing this special torpedo, he says, I'd pay real money for him to shut up. What a wonderful, wonderful final line for Dr. Bones McCoy. Absolutely wonderful. In a TLC interview done in the late 1990s, Kelley joked that one of his biggest fears was that the words etched on his gravestone would be, "He's dead, Jim." Kelley's obituary in Newsweek began, "We're not even going to try to resist. He's dead, Jim." He stated the year before his death that his legacy would be the many people McCoy had inspired to become doctors. Absolutely. That's something that very few people can say they've done, he says. I'm very proud to say that I have. In 1991, Kelley received a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, and in 1999, shortly before his death, he was awarded a Golden Boot Award for his contribution to the genre of Western television and movies. And like I said, he started out in the 50s with films like Fear in the Night and Variety Girl. He actually played Dr. Sherman in The Men, the very famous Marlon Brando movie directed by Fred Zinnemann, where Brando plays a disabled veteran from World War II who tries to come to grips with Teresa Wright, who wants to marry him. But of course, Brando feels that he cannot be a adequate husband. DeForest Kelley was also in Gunfight at the OK Corral. He played Morgan Earp. Morgan Earp in that. He was also in Raintree County. That was a really expensive MGM bomb. I mean, they really wanted to outdo Gone with the Wind with that movie, and unfortunately, it did not succeed. But he was also in Gunfight at Comanche Creek, Where Love Is Gone, Black Spurs, Town Tamer, Marriage on the Rocks, Apache Uprising, and like I said, and then he did all 6 of the original Star Trek films as Dr. Leonard McCoy. His very last credit period was contributing the voice of a Viking in The Brave Little Toaster Goes to Mars. Yep. And among his television shows, he was in Dick Powell's Zane Grey Theater, The Adventures of Jim Bowie, The Rough Riders, Playhouse 90, one of the most famous shows of the 1950s and the early days of television. Perry Mason, The Virginian, Silent Force, Ironside, Room 222, the ABC Afternoon Play Break, And also the Cowboys and the Littlest Hobo. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, greatly missed DeForest Kelley. I mean, great, wonderful character actor that, he always brought something to whatever he did. Now, here's the National Guard. Yeah, they called the National Guard to go and take care of the bunnies. Unless you tell me those rabbits are good at climbing ladders, I got no into budging out of this place. Okay, so we are now at the 1 hour and 10-minute mark. We just reached the 1 hour and 10-minute mark of Night of the Lepus, and we have just 18 minutes left to go. And let's see, what else do we have here? Okay. In the scenes where the rabbits are ferociously roaring, they're actually just yawning. In an interview with self-proclaimed and contentious film historian Tom Weaver, star Janet Leigh said she took the role because it was shot near her home, meant less time away from her family. She also said, "I've forgotten as much as I could about that picture." Oh, interesting. Night of the Lepus is actually featured in, oh no. Here's that famous line. There's a herd of killer rabbits. This roll up your windows. Honk, honk. Move out. The drive-in theaters. We desperately need your help for all these killer rabbits coming this way. Everyone together now, please. Honk, honk, honk. Seriously, if you were at the drive-in and a cop came up and said all that, how would you react? I mean, come on. Let's be like, what? I would scream out the window, "What? Are you on meth? What the hell are you talking about? Giant killer rabbits." Oh, man. Among the many problems that confounded the rabbit wranglers on the film were the fact that the rabbits are herbivores and are naturally docile creatures for whom aggressive behavior is not normal. In fact, their two favorite pastimes are nibbling on vegetables and mating with other rabbits, both of which were difficult to make seem terrifying. You could be a little creative with that, though. You could be a little creative. Due to their mating proclivities, the 24 bunnies bought at the beginning of the filming ballooned to nearly 100 by the time the stampede sequence was filmed. At the end of November, I'm going to do a commentary for a movie that Woody Allen directed called Everything You Always Wanted to Know About Sex But Were Afraid to Ask. The whole title sequence has about 500 white bunnies. And I remember, because my mom was a huge Woody Allen fan, and I remember I was watching it with her, and I was like 12 or 13 years old. Yeah, I know. I was watching this movie with my mom. And I asked her, "What's with all the white bunnies?" And she just said, "Oh, they just like to have sex a lot." Okay. The New York. A special screening was held at Rincon Valley Farmers Market in Tucson, Arizona on July 29th, 2006 to help raise funds for Colossal Cave Mountain Park, where much of the film was originally shot. Admission was $5 for adults and $3 for kids, but ages 5 and under came in for free. It was done for Riff Tracks, Michael J. Nelson, Bill Corbett, and Kevin Murphy of Mystery Science Theater 3000 fame. They actually did a Riff Tracks commentary for anybody that's interested. It was released 3 years before Monty Python and the Holy Grail, which featured, yes, a killer rabbit. And if you ask me, that sequence from Monty Holy Grail is actually more frightening than this. Run away! Run away! Run away! Oh, man. Let's see. Yes, DeForest Kelley, while portraying Dr. McCoy, had an encounter with a white rabbit in the opening scene of Star Trek: The Original Series, Season 1, Episode 15, titled Shore Leave. It was an actor in a rabbit costume, as Bones was talking about Alice in Wonderland. And then finally, strings of popping firecrackers were superimposed over the death scene of the giant rabbits to simulate the electricity. What you have to do to make a movie, right? Now, last but not least, because we are coming up upon 1 hour and 16 minutes. We're getting very close to 1 hour and 16 minutes here, about 12 minutes left to go. Let me talk about the Scream Factory Blu-ray here, which came out a few years ago. Yeah, so this came out in 2018 to replace the MGM disc, which of course was bare bones when that came out in the mid-2000s. This features a new 2K scan from the Interpositive and 2 audio commentaries by author Leigh Gambin and pop culture historian Russell Dyball. Now, oh yeah, just 1 second here. Now, I mentioned Leigh Gambin earlier because he did a commentary for Night of Lepus, and he actually has a very special place in. He actually does really like this film. Well, what I love about Leigh Gambin is that he published this book called "Nope, Nothing Wrong Here: The Making of Cujo." And I'll tell you, this is one of the most gorgeous books I've ever picked up in my life. You know, hardbound, and everything you always wanted to know about Cujo is in this book. This is one of my absolute favorite books that has come out in the past decade because obviously I'm such a huge fan of Cujo. But you know, the interesting thing is that the beginning of Cujo, it opens up with a rabbit. Yeah. It opens up with the rabbit that the St. Bernard ran into the cave trying to catch. And of course, that's when he's bitten by the bat, which of course has rabies. But if you're a Cujo fan, you need to pick this up. You absolutely need to pick up this book. It is awesome. It is absolutely awesome. The rabbits are growling according to the subtitles. Yeah, I don't think so. I really don't think so. According to Blu-ray.com, the ABC encoded image presentation for Night of Lepus is sourced from a new 2K scan, and the results are very impressive for a nearly forgotten B movie, which bizarrely skipped a VHS release. Detail is the big draw here, with clarity reaching as far as the original cinematography permits, delivering an open look at the rabbit rampage, which involves various miniature sets and slow-mo tricks to bring to life. Artifice is easy to spot, but that's part of the fun. While location distances are dimensional and facial particulars are defined, colors are vibrant, embracing period fashion that emphasizes blues and oranges. Greenery is bright, delivering a full sense of Arizona desert and farm life. Skin tones are natural, delineation is secure, keeping the frame communicative. Grain is fine and filmic, and the source is in good shape with no significant elements of damage. Yeah, the video quality got a 4.5 out of 5, and I agree. For a film from 1972, it looks about as good as you would expect. It does look actually really good. Audio quality is also very, very high. And obviously it features the 2 commentaries, but it also has an image gallery with publicity shots, newspaper ads, lobby cards, and poster art, as well as a radio spot and a TV spot and a theatrical trailer. And the author of this review, who is Brian Orndorff, a great writer over at Blu-ray.com, his final assessment, and I will pretty much close the commentary with his final assessment, which is Night of the Lepus has a fair amount of death and child endangerment to keep it edgy. Also focusing on rabbit travel time, which sends the movie into loops of animal action shots to help pad the runtime and create the illusion of an unholy takeover. Again, it's all so goofy, but Claxton doesn't give up before the film is over, straining to make something exciting and possibly terrifying along the way, especially for anyone who has some type of rabbit phobia. Night of the Lepus is amusing with its hustle and attempts to pull off complicated special effects with low-budget tools, but there's charm in its failures and a minor delight in its ambition. There's a reason it's one of the few monster rabbit features showing immense genre bravery as it tries to make cuddly wuddly animals into a pure horror show. And he gave Night of Lepus, I think, a very appropriate 3 stars out of 5. But that's about as high as I think that any of us are probably willing to go for this film. I mean, I think it deserves its cult audience, as many other films have generated over the years. If you love rabbits, if you're a rabbit fan and a horror fan, I mean, this movie is made specifically for you. Would I recommend this to Star Trek fans? Probably not. I mean, unless you love DeForest Kelley so much that you have to see him here. But honestly, I mean, look, let's be fair here. As much as I like the quartet of actors that headline this film, the real stars are the bunnies. They are the real stars of Night of the Lepus, hands down. So, at any rate, I'm actually kind of glad I picked up this Blu-ray. And then, like I said, I do intend on seeing this movie again with one of the commentary tracks, which both are excellent. Both are excellent. I mean, both have, their intimate knowledge of the film and its history, certainly a lot more than me. I mean, of course, they're much more professional in their assessments and everything. But like I said, if you're a fan of the movie, go ahead and pick up this Blu-ray. I mean, this is probably the best it's ever going to look. And like I said, it's been blessed with a pair of terrific audio commentaries. But I also want to recommend, especially if you're a fan of Night of the Lepus, there's another thing I would like to recommend real quick. Of course, I am a massive fan of Red Letter Media. And they actually did Night of the Lepus for their Best of the Worst show, along with Zombie 3 and Silk. And this is actually, to be perfectly honest, this is one of my favorite Best of the Worst episodes because here's the link right here for anybody who wants to watch it after the movie. They actually film this episode with VHS cameras. These very old VHS cameras from the 1980s, so that we'll see everything in horribly blown out of low-grade imagery. The only reprieve would be the fact that all 3 movies watched are 2K and 4K restorations available on Blu-ray, but the movies themselves are just terrible, so it doesn't matter. And you know what? They actually came away from the movie not hating it necessarily, but it didn't win Best of the Worst. I believe that was Zombie 3. I'm pretty sure that was Zombie 3 that won. But yeah, I mean, I love those guys, and they did a wonderful Best of the Worst episode. And there's a lot of other YouTube videos that cover the movie, especially from fans of the horror community and everything. So I mean, this film, I think, rightfully has finally earned its place in the pantheon of horror cinema, even though it's very, very far from being one of the finest of the genre. And here we have all the bunny rabbits about to meet their doom to be electrocuted, basically. Wow. Yeah, those rabbits, they love to reproduce, don't they? I'm surprised they haven't taken over the entire country by the end of this movie. But no, just this small Arizona town, because they need to keep everything in one small area. Aw, poor little bunnies. Here they all get electrocuted. Oh my God. These effects. The miniatures, you know what? I'll say the miniatures are fine. They're about as good as you're going to get in terms of the miniatures at the time. And like I said, I guess, they are better than CGI for that matter. But this stuff right here is like, oh my God, I kind of wish the bunnies had taken over the entire state. They could take care of those, so-called poll watchers that, arrive at the poll stations with all the weapons and everything. Maybe. It's... Oh, glorious. Just absolutely glorious. Power lines crackling. Yeah, that one guy with the MP hat, he's like, yeah, we got him. We got him. Yeah, congratulations. You just killed a bunch of rabbits. Yeah, absolutely. Congratulations. And that's it. Yeah, they're all dead. That's it. There's, nothing else to really say or do or everything. But of course, we have this denouement, 1 hour and 27 minutes, where Stuart Whitman and Rory Calhoun will have a final conversation here. Oh, great. And the rabbits. Jackie said yesterday he saw some new rabbit burrows north of the water hole, but nothing like they used to be. Well, survival of the fittest. That's only fair, I suppose. Yeah. So that's it. That's it. Hopefully we won't have this giant bunny massacre ever again. Now, my question in closing the commentary is that can any of you see this being remade? Could any of you possibly see this being remade as a legitimate horror film? Do you think this could be done any better? I want to pose that to everybody in the chat right now. Like, do you think this could possibly be remade into a better movie? Or do you think that it probably would be best to remake it as a comedy? Yeah, I mean, hey, I mean, I mean, it's got a cult reputation now. You would think that, people would try to take this thing up, but I think that studios would say, no. I mean, of course, they could try to actually do a real, genuine adaptation of the book, which, of course, is very long out of print at this point. But yeah, that is Night of the Lepus, the 1972 quote-unquote horror film directed by William F. Claxton and starring Stuart Whitman, Janet Leigh, DeForest Kelley, and Rory Calhoun. So at any rate, I will hope to see you all again tonight at 8 p.m. as I do The Possession of Joel Delaney, starring Shirley MacLaine. This was the first time it ever arrived on Blu-ray, and it was only very, very recently. This was released only in the last year or so. Very, very rare pre-Exorcist movie about witchcraft and possession starring Shirley MacLaine. And like I said, right before I do the commentary for that, I'll make sure to read the book and even probably quote the book while I do the commentary as well. And like I said, at 11 p.m., I will also be doing Brian De Palma's Sisters, starring Jennifer Salt and Margot Kidder. One more time, a shout out to everybody in the chat. That Muse, John, Rob Gasper, Cliff Booth, Jamie Hart, and Rob Gasper and Dan Shine. Thank you so much for all coming out tonight. You guys are wonderful. Thank you so much for coming out and supporting my channel on these commentaries. And Easter comedy. That's right. Let's remake Night of the Lepus for Easter. That would definitely work. Nope, unless they went darker on the bunny design. Yep. I loved it, Stone. Killed by cuteness. Classic. Yes. So yeah, there you go. So anyway, you all have a wonderful wonderful day. I will see you tonight at 9 p.m. You all take care and have